Welcome again to the International Parent and Family Orientation. This is the fourth webinar in the series. And today we have the privilege of having a faculty panel to talk to us about how to navigate through UC San Diego from a faculty perspective. My name is Tom Smith-Zhen. My Chinese name is Zhen Yong. I'm the Senior Executive Director of Development for our International and Campus Initiatives program in the Office of Advancement. I have the pleasure first to introduce the Director of our Academic Integrity Office, and that is Dr. Tricia Bertrand-Galland. Dr. Galland joined UC San Diego in 2006. She is an internationally known expert on integrity and ethics in education. She has 2 degrees from University of Guelph in Canada, and her PhD is from a neighboring school, University of San Diego. Dr. Galland, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Tom. So yes, as Tom mentioned, I am from Canada and did my PhD down the street here in San Diego. And so I was too an international student, and welcome all of you here to talk about the teaching and learning environment at UC San Diego and hear from our faculty, 3 of our faculty from very different areas on their experiences working with students and advice that they have for your students and maybe even for you. So Professors Chung, Heintzman, and Lowe, if you want to unmute and show your video. And then we will, great. So I will first pass it over to Stanley. Stanley, do you want to say a little bit more about yourself? And particularly, sorry, just to interrupt, particularly if you have ever studied international, been an international student, some background on your life as a student would be great too.
Of course, thank you. Hi everyone, my name is Stanley Lowe. I am faculty here in biological sciences. And a little bit about my own background, my own life, history, and educational background. I was born in Hong Kong, and then I grew up in Vancouver, British Columbia in Canada. After high school, I came to the United States for college and then also graduate school. I've also done study abroad when I was an undergraduate student. That was in Japan for language studies.
Great, thank you. Erica, you're next on my screen.
Hi, I'm Erica Heintzman, and I work in education department. And a little bit about my background as a student. I have the distinction of being a local. I grew up in San Diego, went to college in San Diego, and now I teach in San Diego. But I think it's just so wonderful to have the ability to travel. And so I really am honored to be here tonight supporting our international students.
Thanks, Erica. And Liz?
Saludos, buenas noches, buenos días, buenas tardes. So hello, my name is Luz Chung, and I am also an international student. I was an international student, but I still think I'm an international student. I grew up in Ecuador, in South America. My parents are Chinese. They were immigrants to Ecuador. And like Professor Lowe, after graduating from high school, I came to UCSD to go to college, and I stayed here, and I've been teaching here in San Diego. I went to school here in San Diego, did my graduate work also here at UCSD, and then I stayed and taught in local schools, K-12 public schools, and also here at the university. It's really awesome to be a part of this panel.
Yes, and Liz and I have been on this, I've moderated, and Liz has been on this panel for, I think, 3 or so years now. So we welcome Erica and Stanley to our little club here. Great, well, thank you for sharing. I think it's interesting. I ask about your background as students because I think it does make a difference, right? It shapes who you are, and it shapes who you are as a professor and how you approach teaching and learning. One of my biggest regrets as an undergrad was I did not do study abroad when I was an undergrad. I was too scared. I actually didn't make it off the continent until I was 31 years old. And my first trip was to Spain during my PhD program. And then I've, traveled so much since then. I don't remember the girl who was scared to leave her country. And I bring that up because I know how scary, like it's exciting, but it's also really scary to go to a new place. For some people, thousands and thousands and thousands of miles away from their home and their family. And so what we want to do today is talk to you about how we make this teaching and learning environment inclusive and exciting and a great place to learn for all of our students, regardless of whether they're like Erica and they grew up down the street or whether they're from far away like Ecuador or Canada. So I'd like to begin, and I want to start with kind of just general questions about the teaching and learning environment, and then move into talking specifically about working with international students. And Stanley, I'm going to direct the first question to you first. What do you find unique about teaching at UC San Diego?
Sorry, Tricia, could you repeat the question? I think I got disconnected.
Yeah. What do you find unique about teaching at UC San Diego?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and I think it's an important one because because I think UC San Diego is unique in many ways, and it's really an interesting, unique combination of being a large public research university, and I think that's fairly uncommon, in the United States at least. Where we're large public research university that also serves very diverse students, right? So that includes international students, but also students from various social cultural backgrounds from within the United States. And I think part of having been across many different institutions at different parts in the country, I find that this particular aspect where we serve very diverse students. We are a public institution with a public education ethos. And we are a very research intensive university where students have the opportunities to work with world-class researchers and scholars. And we are a very big university. And oftentimes, big seems like a scary place, and it is, but also means that we have a lot of resources and a lot of opportunities for students. So this is a very unique story, but I have a lot of students ask me about research opportunities because they are specifically interested in a particular topic of research. And my answer is often that I don't actually know what everyone's doing here on campus. I was told once that just in the Department of Pediatrics at the medical school, there is over 800 faculty members. And so I tell the students that it's very likely that somebody is studying the kinds of things you want to study, and we can find those people together, right? But not off the top of my head, I wouldn't know everyone. And that's a really important thing to point out, right? Is that there's tremendous resources at a large place like this. And I believe the UC library, right? So this is the system-wide library, is the largest academic library in the world. So,
and we have the nicest library building in the world, I think, right? Hasn't it won awards for its architecture? So that makes sense. Erica, would you add anything to that? What do you find unique about teaching here?
I would also add that we have wonderful student support services that we recognize that you're a full human being. And so there's wonderful things to get involved with, whether that's extracurriculars, but then there's also lots of academic support. And then just wherever you are in life support as well. I mean, like, commuter students, Stanley alluded to, there's lots of different sociocultural backgrounds that come to UCSD. And, we have an affinity group for almost everyone here. And so I think that is also wonderful. The other benefit of UCSD is how connected we are to the community. And we especially see that in education studies. And so there is lots of opportunities to be really involved locally and to think globally, but to really take that action locally as well.
Yeah. Well, Erica, thank you for that. And because you gave me an opening, I'm going to make a plug. My office is one of those many offices on campus where you can get involved, right? Your student can get leadership experience in our office. We employ over 50 students, around 50 students, and we have another 30 or so on our review board, but we're just one example of an office on campus where students can get involved. So there's, like Erica said, there's affinity groups or student orgs where people can get involved, but there's also like actual job experiences. And that's really important for the international student, right, Liz, because they can't work off campus. So what would you add anything to the unique thing that you think is about, what you think is unique about UC San Diego?
Yeah, just to echo what my colleagues have said, I think the energy that the students bring is amazing. And that's what's wonderful about teaching at UC San Diego. And also, you know, the opportunities to get involved in public service. So one of the things that we can do at UCSD is provide you with opportunities to go out into the community and get to know San Diego. So UCSD is not La Jolla. UCSD, you know, I mean, San Diego is not just La Jolla. I mean, San Diego is much wider. And you know, I really encourage you to take advantage of that, of the opportunities that you have to get to know San Diego through a different lens. And also there are different, well, not services, but different organizations on campus, like the Cross-Cultural Center and some other spaces for students that are student-led, which also provide you with those leadership opportunities. So take advantage of those. I know it's pretty scary when you're in a different country by yourself, but those are spaces where you can find a lot of support.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, I think it's really important to note that. And actually, I know we have time for Q&A at the end, but there was a question posted that I think is really relevant to what you just said, Luce, which is, should students feel comfortable approaching their professors for help, or is there someone else that they should approach for help? And you know what I would say to this, Erica, Luce, and Stanley. So what would you say? Let's go back to Erica.
Absolutely approach your professors. We are here, we want to see students succeed. And we also enjoy talking about our content area with students and learning from them. And so I think absolutely. And there's also, though, lots of other academic support, like I'm thinking of Teaching and Learning Commons and Writing Hub. And so there is wonderful support beyond your professors as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Liz, you speak multiple languages, right?
Well, okay.
Kind of.
Sure, kind of.
Rusty, a little rusty.
English is a little rusty.
Oh, that's not true. What would you say then to somebody who said, yeah, but I don't think I can, I'm worried about going to talk to a professor and they won't understand me, or I say the wrong thing, or I don't know how to I have an accent. What do you say to that?
Who cares? Just go for that. You know what? As a student, I was very self-conscious because when I was a first-year student, I definitely I struggled. Really, I struggle a lot with writing in English, which is being able to function in English and academic English. And I was really embarrassed to go and talk to people because I felt that they would see me as a failure. But I think, I think professors and in general, people who support you will see that you're genuinely trying to learn. And you know what, we can get into research about language ideology and all that. That's that's another topic. But it's really important that you know that you are here, that you belong, and that we're here with you, and that you're not alone. So please do not feel embarrassed. You might, it's scary, but it doesn't mean that it is not possible. So we're here to support you, and don't feel that you're going to be judged. That's not the case.
Yeah. And I would say, I always say to the international students that I interact with, you think that the domestic students are any less scared to go talk to their professor? They're petrified too, right? Like I think we, not to diminish, the language struggles that you went through, Luce, and that other people go through, but it's scary. It can be scary. And part of the growing up we do in university is learn how to have the courage to do things that we were otherwise scared to do, right? Like, you know, Stanley, how many times have you sat in office hours and no one came to see you?
Too many times.
Too many times. Stanley's sitting there waiting for students to come talk to him. And I'm sure Erica and Luz have had the same experience. And so professors and TAs, right? So graduate students and undergrads who serve as tutors or TAs for the classes, sit around and wait for your students to come talk to them. So please do make use of campus resources. I would add, just as the three of these folks are going to know, do not use outside resources. Please do not use any resource that sounds good outside the university. Please advise your student, your child to not use resources that are outside the university, because they can't guarantee their quality. They can't guarantee whether they're legitimate or not. And it's just, we have so many resources, as Erica said, it's just better to use the in-house ones. Okay, so we've just experienced an 18 months of, oh yeah, Stanley.
Sorry, Tricia, could I jump in and add?
Sure.
Well, funny you mentioned the 18-month, I assume this relates to the pandemic.
Yeah.
So the undergraduate colleges have a dine with a prof and dine with a graduate student program. It's dine or coffee, right? So,
yeah.
So it's a great opportunity, right? And it's set up by the colleges where the student can invite a graduate student or a professor to coffee or lunch, and it's funded by campus through the undergraduate colleges, and it's often an icebreaker because it's an established program, right? Professors and graduate students know about it, and it's the colleges also have support in how students could invite professors and graduate students. They what kinds of topics you can talk about, and some sort of initial guiding questions for conversations in case, right? The conversation gets slow or something. So I encourage people to take advantage of those resources that are available.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure what the dining and coffee situation is with campus reopening
right now. Yeah.
But the program exists, and
yeah,
and right, we'll just have to work around the logistics and the physical constraints.
Always do it outside. Always eat outside. Yeah. All right. So yes, pandemic. We are still in a pandemic. We are going to be in classes in person at this moment. That's what we're saying, right? Starting next week. But we have spent the last 18 months teaching remotely, not online. We weren't doing online teaching, as we like to say. We were doing emergency remote instruction because it was not planned, and I think, learned a lot over this last 18 months. So Luz, I'm going to direct this question to you. What innovative practices have you picked up over the last 18 months, teaching practices that you actually plan to continue even in an in-person or a hybrid or teaching situation?
I think one of the things that I learned is that at the beginning of the remote instruction, we were given a million tools, technology tools to use, and it was very confusing and very overwhelming.
Yeah.
And what I learned is that we have to pick only maybe a couple to use in the classroom, and those tools have to be very, very efficient. So one thing that I learned is that we can use technology in very engaging ways. And we can use them in ways that will not only promote engagement, but also allow for students to be able to share their knowledge in a variety of ways. So we can get away from just having students write papers or take exams. Now they can record Flipgrid videos with answers, or like with their stories or responses to the readings. They can do, they can record audio, they can sing, so there are many different ways in which we can use technology for that. So I've learned that. But I've also learned that our students are super resilient and they want to continue learning. So we cannot just simply say, here's a recorded lecture, go have fun. The students really wanted engagement. and they appreciated when we held our classes, even if we disappeared because our connection went bad. so I really learned that the students were really hungry for that. All of us were very hungry for that. And I think one of the tools that I think I'm going to use, that I'm going to continue to use, are some of the things that I used during the remote learning practices, which were using, I'm going to name some names that might not necessarily make any sense, but like electronic bulletin boards, Padlets, Jamboards, Flipgrids, things that's where students can share information together. Erica knows this, but we have posters that we put up and the students go with markers, but I think we can do away with that just to be more environmentally conscious. For example, in my large lecture hall, in my large lecture classroom this year, we used to have, I don't know if you remember, you've seen that, Stanley, but it's a mic that is made out of foam that you throw around in the classroom so that students can speak to it, and so that their voices can be heard. But I don't think we're allowed to use that anymore. So I was given another tool where students can use their phone as mics, which is super cool because it will allow students to be able to use technology to speak up, and they don't have to wait for that mic to arrive. So there are different tools that I think I'm going to be using that are going to be very useful, and hopefully they're going to be more environmentally friendly. But definitely will continue the engagement and the community building that we do in our classes.
Great, thanks, Liz. Erica, do you have anything you want to add to that? What's an innovative practice that you discovered that you're going to try and keep using?
We had to pivot tremendously in the pandemic. And so one of the silver linings out of this is we developed a lot of virtual field experiences for our students. While I am very excited to go back to having the students go out to sites and all of that, I'm going to keep a portion of that because I saw tremendous, wonderful growth from the students by them engaging in these larger communities of educators. And so I definitely want to keep a portion of that. And if the pandemic had never happened, I don't think I would have went in that direction. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's, there's an opportunity to find gems out of really challenging situations. Stanley, both Erica and Luz mentioned engagement and kind of this community. You're welcome to feed in on the innovative practice, but what I'm actually hoping is maybe one of your innovative practices was centered around community. We do know that it is more difficult in remote instruction. It's harder to engage with you. I'm looking at you and I know you all and we've engaged before, but it's harder when you're just these flat two-dimensional things on the screen. So was there anything you did, Stanley, to create community in your classes to help with that?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think my innovation that I would, take from emergency remote instruction back into person is really about the community. And it's really prioritizing, it's something that we've always done prior to the pandemic, but I think it's highlighted to me at least how extra important it is and how we can make it more front and center and explicit as a goal. So really prioritizing supporting one another as human beings, as students and as scholars, and fostering intellectual engagement, social connection, and accommodations, right, for challenges that individual students may be facing for various reasons in their own lives through unique situations. And we've done a lot of intentional community building in the remote courses that we've taught, and actually I'm planning to bring a lot of that back into the in-person version, including spending time with a series of guided icebreaker questions that allow students to get to know one another more as individuals before they dive into the more challenging intellectual work together. We have set up sort of community norms and guidelines that we have been working with students in the past year and a half to co-construct and develop together. And it's an ongoing, right? So we started with something, and every quarter, every course, students talk through them and add to them and make changes. And so each iteration is a improved and refined version. And I plan to continue to do that, back in person. And like Liz was saying, right, some of that obviously was done right through interactive online medium, Google Docs and things like that, right, where we will probably continue to do that, but in an in-person version, because then we don't have to have students can type together on a computer without having to pass things around, and both, I think, until the pandemic gets over, and also in a more potentially environmentally friendly way.
I think that's great, because we are a very sustainable campus, right? We recycle our water to water all our plants. We have solar panels everywhere. So that's a great way to look at what we learned during the pandemic to continue sustainability. What you also mentioned, though, is connected to another question we have that I'd like to go to, Luce, and see if you have some thoughts about it. So not all of our students, not all of our international students are going to be able to come to class, to campus necessarily right away, or maybe they're going to miss sometimes because of visa restrictions or COVID restrictions, travel issues. So have you thought about that, and how you're going to help, or say that the student is quarantined for 2 weeks because they were exposed to COVID and now they have to be remote and they can't come to your class in person. So what is your thinking around that? How you're going to make sure those students stay engaged?
That's a really good question. It's a really tough question because so hybrid teaching is very challenging for many reasons. One of them being, the technology is not very familiar to a lot of us. But I know that, like Stanley said, as faculty, we're more than willing to make accommodations. So if a student is unable to attend a particular, we call it a resilient syllabus, right? So if a student is unable to attend a particular class, or, for whatever reason, then we are here and we will make accommodations. So I already know what other assignments I will have the students do, or how we'll meet with the student remotely. Also, I just learned this by going to the lecture hall where I'm going to be teaching, that all the lecture halls now have Zoom capacity, I think. So if necessary, we can record that particular session for the student who might not be there. One of the things that I experienced last spring and winter, and this is probably not connected to anything, or hopefully, is that one of the classes that I teach is a service learning class where students had to go and they have to go and tutor in the community. But all the students were doing this remotely, regardless of whether they lived here or in Russia. But what was really magical about that is that I had a student in Russia, I had two students in China who tutored remotely, and they would actually wake up at 3 a.m. to tutor the kids. And because it just brought them so much joy to be able to be connected. So I think, we can work things out. I'm not saying that that's standard practice, but it's something that we can work it out as faculty with the students.
Great. Thanks, Liz. That's amazing. Yeah, that's some more of these great things that we've discovered during the pandemic. So we're at 6:33. So I want to move on to specifically talking about working and teaching and supporting international students. Erica, I'll go to you. How do you work and support and teach international students? And maybe it's the same way I do other, non-international students, but what do you want the parents of our international students to know about their students working with you and learning from you?
One thing that I'm fortunate being in education studies is we take a asset approach, and we really value the lived experience of our students. And that is so important to learning about education, because they've been for at least a decade or so before they come to us. And so they've had this wealth of experience, whether abroad or domestically. And then it's learning about theories and frameworks, and using that own experience they've already had, guiding them in understanding and making sense of these different interpretation of education and different research. And so I value international students because I certainly know the US education system well. And so it's so wonderful to hear about other places in the world and to have that knowledge in the room. So when we're talking about STEM education, well, how does it work in other countries? What approaches, what pedagogy is favored? What experiences are standard? What about admission policies and all these different things that may or may not translate onto the American system, but is really informative. So I think it's a wonderful asset that they bring into the classroom, is this whole perspective that otherwise we would not have in that classroom. So
thank you. So Luce and Erica are both from the Ed Studies department. Stanley, you're in bio. Bio's the same, biology, right, is the same, regardless of what country you grew up in, unlike education systems, which Erica was just referring to. So what's it like for you working with international students in bio, and how do you do anything different with international students to work with them or support them or teach them?
Yeah, I think it's not as much as, you know, international students versus non-international students. I think in many ways, each individual students, like Erica said, comes to our campus with their own backgrounds and lived experiences. And it's hard to say, right, that, you know, all international students are gonna operate or function one way. And so I think in many ways, you know, I do pay attention to, I think, students who are coming from abroad where, you know, they might have additional, you know, differences that they're trying to navigate. But at the same time, I think overall, you know, we're in many ways, you know, we're trying to have, you know, a learning experience that, you know, even at a big place like right, UC San Diego, to have a learning experience for students that where they get some level of individual attention, right? So for example, I know biological sciences is one of the largest majors on campus. We have, actually, I think we have 7 different biological sciences majors, right? But I think, right, we have a large number of teaching and instructional assistants that are both graduate and undergraduate students. And you know, in many ways, I think the undergraduate instructional assistants serve a really unique role in that, you know, they are likely just a year or 2 years ahead of right in the undergraduate curriculum, and they are really familiar with the challenges and struggles and resources, right, that are available on campus that a lot of times, you know, PhD students who did not do their undergraduates here may not know about, and a lot of times you may not know about, right? And so I think by working with a number of sort of, right, support structures and layers even in a large course, right, there are ways that we are trying to engage students individually in ways that make sense for them.
Thanks, Stanley. So Luce, I know you have lots to say about this this topic because we've talked before about it, but you know, something that struck me about what Stanley said is this idea, like in bio, it is true. They have tons of undergrads who serve as tutors. That's true also in computer science and engineering. And so it does sometimes feel more comfortable to go to someone who's just, you know, a year older than you or 2 years older than you to ask questions rather than big, scary Professor Chung, right? So we had a question in the Q&A that's kind of tied to this, and it's kind of tied to our conversation earlier about, like, should they approach professors, right? Should they ask questions? So this person said, I know academic rules are different in the US and other countries. If my student has a question regarding what is allowed or not allowed, who can they ask? So I thought maybe if you could tie together, like, you know, how you support international students in the ways that Erica and Stanley have been talking about, but also fold this in there too, and helping them understand what the norms and the standards are here.
Yeah, I think I'm going to speak for our department, but we have a very robust service learning program. And within that service learning program, this is where students go out into the schools to be mentors and tutors. Within that program, because it is an undergraduate program, we draw student leaders, future undergraduate teaching assistants. So so because you work on campus, you can have the F1 visa and work. And what's really nice is that we foster leadership among our students starting from their second year with us in EDS. So even if their major is something else, it doesn't have to be education studies, they can still become the mentors and the tutors for their peers. So I'm just going to give you a quick example. One of my students is an international student. She just graduated from UCSB and now she's going to graduate school. And she actually took it up on herself to do a lot of mentoring of international students who were in our classes. So like Erica mentioned, a lot of the students who take our classes, for example, and go and tutor in schools, they may not necessarily know how the system works in this country. So they have a lot of questions. And these are very good questions. So we would guide them, this is how you talk to the teacher, it is okay to email the teacher, it is okay to do this, these are things that you can do at the school, these are things that you cannot do at the school site. It's very different. So it was really nice to see how this particular undergraduate assistant helped not just the international students, but also our local students navigate how to work with the school system in positive ways, how to mentor, how to work with kids, how to tutor. And I think that's something that I highly recommend students do, is to seek those opportunities where they can be undergraduate tutors or instructional assistants, because you're much closer to the students, to the other students' age, but also you have already that knowledge. You've been in the class, you've gone through the struggles of being in that class, but you're also able to share the successes and the promises.
Great, thank you. Erica or Stanley, anything you want to add to, I can answer this question, but anything you want to add to if a student has a question about what is allowed or not allowed, what should they do or who should they ask?
I think it goes back to an earlier question, right, which is definitely come and talk to the faculty and also the teaching and instructional assistants, right? They are working with you in the course and are best to address these kinds of questions if it's specifically related to your course.
Yeah.
Sorry, Erica, you also unmuted.
I saw her unmute, yeah.
No, it's been covered basically. And then obviously your office is phenomenal in helping us convey that to the students and how to message that clearly so that we can make that very explicit from the beginning.
Yeah, I would say the one thing I would say to add to all of that is this is the one place where I would say don't ask a fellow student. And I talk to my international students about this because they think that the US students know, like that this is a US secret and all the US students know what the rules are and they just have to ask one of them. Don't tell your student not to ask another student, tell them to ask the instructor, ask a TA, or ask my office. That'd be definitely one place I would not want your student to get advice from other students on. Okay, can any of you speak to how students, Stanley, you hinted at this earlier, you kind of talked about students asking you like, who can I do research with, as if you knew every single researcher and faculty member on campus. But how do you actually engage undergraduate students in research? It is a big campus. How do they find it? But then specifically, how do you do it? Do you have undergrads that work with you on research projects?
Yeah, so I think campus has a number of resources that both help students find research opportunities, and sometimes, depending on the program, we'll also have funding support for that as well, right? So, for example, there is the REAL portal, which REAL stands for something, Research and Experiential
And applied learning? No, I don't know.
And applied, yeah, something like that, right? We have a lot of acronyms on campus.
Yes,
right?
we do.
It's a portal where people can post internships and research opportunities and research positions that are available. And in that sense, right, that means that whoever is posting them have intentionally posted those positions, right? So they are looking, to work with undergraduates on research projects. We have the Undergraduate Research Hub, right, which was previously AEP, right? It's now Undergraduate Research Hub. It's the central office on campus that handles, well, maybe not handles, not the right word, but coordinates and organizes a lot of the undergraduate research programs that are available, especially over the summer, but also throughout the academic year. And that would be another resource. And I think those are sort of the big ones at the campus level that comes to mind. And then a lot of times it would also be talk to your professors or teaching and instructional assistants. So for me, right, this is a very, again, sort of silly example, but I didn't know what research was. I think my roommate at the, my undergraduate roommate, my college roommate had parents who are either researchers or have PhDs, and they told him that he should be doing research with professors, and then he told me. And so I walked up to one of my professors after class and said, I want to do research with you. And he said, why? And of course, I have never thought about this question before. And I remember saying, well, he talks about proteins a lot in class. So I said, I like proteins. And then he said, good enough, let's chat in my office, right? And that was how I ended up doing research for 4 years as an undergraduate. And so some of it is serendipity, right? But at the same time, I think, there are resources on campus, and some of it is through, the systematic resources, and other times are through talking with, the professors who you're already interacting in class, and also both the graduate and undergraduate teaching and instructional assistants as well, because a lot of them are also engaged in research.
Yeah, that's so funny, Stanley, because what I just told a student the other day is, Google professor, every professor's got a web page that says what their research agenda is, what their research interests are. Find somebody who's doing research that you're interested in and go talk to them, right? Introduce yourself. So mine was a bit more thoughtful, Stanley, than just like, hey, can I do research with you? But it works for you, so that's great. But you can also just Google people and see who's here that's doing cool research you're interested in. A related question, Erica, that came in through the Q&A is, okay, so we know how to become a researcher as an undergrad. How do you become a TA or a tutor? We've talked a lot about that today.
That is also really helpful to start with the professor. And, for the classes that you like, you took the class, you were successful in the class, and then to find out, when class offered again, which quarters, and start the process for applying to those positions as well. But it's great to have that established relationship with the professor, because they get the application and they already know you, they remember you, they know your enthusiasm, and they're like, oh, this person would be fantastic to work with my next cohort of students.
Yeah, step one is being a good, engaged student, right? Because some of these classes are really large. And so, but if you are the one who is going to office hours, if you are the one who's talking to the professor, talking to the professor or the TAs, if you're the one who is showing up, that makes you stand out. And so then you can go through the formal process. But as Erica says, there might be lots of applications, so it's helpful. Other good reason you should talk to faculty, right? You all know this torture when a student comes to you in spring quarter of their senior year and says, I need you to be a reference for me. And they took one class from you in first year, right? So in addition to talking to professors, because they can help you, right? With the course, with the content, 2, they can tell you what the academic integrity rules are, what's allowed and what's not. 3, maybe they can get you involved in research. 4, maybe they can get you involved in being a TA or tutor. And 5, maybe they can give you a reference 4 years from now or 3 years from now when you're applying to graduate school. So that's always good advice for parents to give your children, is start to get to know people in your first year, because don't wait, because you're going to need reference letters later, and you're not going to be successful if you just ask a professor out of the blue to write you a reference letter. And I think we've been taking questions all along, so I think we have a couple more minutes. I want to just go around and let everybody give any final words of advice they'd like to give. And Luz, we'll turn to you.
I know it's scary. It can be very lonely. I know that. You have to, all of a sudden, for those of you for whom English is not your first language, all of a sudden you have to navigate everything in a different language. And it's just very difficult, but just know that there are tons of support systems here on campus. There's the International Center, that was my home. There's OASIS, the Office of Academic Support. That was my second home. That's where I found a lot of friends. But also, one of the things that I wish I did was to you have to, of course, you want to be a good student, but don't just focus so much on getting those good grades. You're all going to do well. We're going to support you in that, but also, just get involved in other opportunities and see what's out there. I've had many international students who have fallen in love with the communities that they've worked with through our department, even though they're now going to medical school or doing something completely different. Some of them have become teachers, which is really cool. But just know that there's much more to UCSD than just being on campus, and that there are a lot of support systems here, but there's also a whole community out there. And like Stanley said, if you talk to your professor and say, I'm kind of interested in this thing that you're doing. I learned that you're doing this at this particular high school where you're actually speaking Spanish, and can I go with you? I'd love to work with you on that project. Yeah, why not? So just be adventurous in that sense, even though it can be a little bit scary. And again, be yourself, have fun, and just don't forget to breathe and enjoy. I know that it's a lot of money, and I know that it feels that if you just don't focus on studying, you'll be wasting your family's money. But the reality is that college is more than just classes. It's about the experiences as well. So take advantage of that too.
Thank you for saying that. I like to say that the degree will get you a job, but your skills, knowledge, and abilities will keep you the job. So it's way more than having that piece of paper. Erica, your final words of wisdom and remember, we're talking to parents. So your wisdom might be for the parents of the international student rather than the students themselves. And we've been talking a lot to our students, through the parents, but.
Well, Luz said it so well and so comprehensively. I would definitely say to highlight something Luz brought up a little bit was well-being is really important. So not only ask how your child is doing academically, but also how are they doing emotionally and physically, and encouraging them when they may not feel that much, when they may feel timid or unsure, to take those risks and to be people and to reach out to communities on campus, and to take full advantage of this wonderful opportunity. I am a local, and like Trisha, I did not travel internationally until after graduation. And so that is a deep regret. And so one of the wonderful things about your children coming to us now is they have this, incredible opportunity. And so to really take full advantage and encourage them to do more than just study.
Yeah.
Become a part of the UC San Diego community and the larger San Diego community, and feel like they belong here, because they do.
I love that. And I advise parents to never, ever ask, how are your grades? Don't ask them what their grades are. Ask them, like Erica said, how are you? How are you doing emotionally? Are you learning? Are you gaining new skills? Are you growing as a person? Are you making friends? Are you having experiences? The grades will come if they're engaged in the learning. But if a parent only asks about grades, then the student will think that's all you care about, and they might do whatever it takes to get you that grade you're asking for. So put the language away about grades and just ask them about them and their learning and their experiences. Stanley, you get the last word. And then we have to pass to Tom.
Okay, I don't think I
2
have.
seconds. No, I'm kidding.
Okay,
Go.
I don't think I have additional last words. Maybe it's very similar to what others have said, and I think encourage your child or student to not be afraid to try new things and to embrace failure as a learning experience. And there's no better time to try something completely different, completely new that you might not have thought about in the past, and it may be a good surprise, right? That you find out that you're really interested and passionate about it. It may be other kind of good surprise that you learn something that you never thought about. So even though you may not end up doing that, for the rest of your life. So.
Awesome. Thank you to all three of you, Professor Chung, Professor Lowe, Professor Heintzman. I am going to turn it back over to Tom.
Thank you, Dr. Bertrand-Galland, and thank you, the three faculty members. You guys are just wonderful. And I don't know what more I can add, but since I'm the host of the program, I'm going to add a couple of my 2 cents to the audience. One is, don't be shy. Like the professor said, get to know them. They are people too. And when we can meet in person, they're three-dimensional. And you really will enjoy getting to know them, both as your teacher and perhaps as a friend. I waited until graduate school before I discovered the joy of getting to know my faculty members. And luckily, essentially, I got a second chance in grad school to do that. So my advice to the undergrads is do not wait. Reach out and get to know them. My second advice or second thought I have is we have a saying in Chinese, 活到老，学到老. In English, simply you can translate that to lifelong learning. And lifelong learning often is something we say to the students and to alumni that your education does not begin and end at UC San Diego. But as you can see, our professors all personify that saying. Along with you, the students, they learn from you, they learn from one another, and they continue to evolve and innovate. And this is an ongoing process. So you as students are a big part of this, what we call educational process. So with that, I want to point you to some resources and tools. Obviously, Dr. Bertrand-Galland leads the Academic Integrity Office. So she and her staff can help you and answer a number of questions you may have about what it means to maintain academic integrity in the context of your education here in the United States. For those of you who are continuing to study remotely, we do have a website specifically dedicated for your use. So that's the second one, keeping learning remotely. You probably should take advantage of that resource. And then lastly, another good sort of collective resource on strategies and tools to avoid plagiarism, because often it is something very innocuous and innocent, perhaps, that you did on your part, and yet it becomes a flagrant violation in the eyes of academia. So it's important to learn and to internalize these rules and policies and just good practices as you develop a studying habit. So these are tools that you can use. In closing, I want to remind all the audience members that we are here to help. My colleague, Marilyn Lee, and I, Dr. Lee, in fact, is a PhD from Arizona State University. She travels to China and other parts of Asia frequently, as I did before the pandemic, and we very much long for the opportunity to come back to meet with specifically parents in China or elsewhere in Asia. Our colleagues, Dan Perez, Jody Wisely, they represent the Parent and Family Office, and they're also great resources. So drop them a note, say hello in person if you see them around campus. We're all really here to lend a hand. You know, I myself am an immigrant student. When I first came to university, I grew up in Taiwan, and so many things that our faculty members related, I personally experienced, slightly different, but you know, it's all part and parcel of that learning experience. In closing, I very much want to thank you for taking time, for joining us and supporting your student. If at any point you have questions or concerns, please feel free to contact the Office of Parent and Family Programs through the avenues that you see on screen. And this video and others recorded sessions from the previous webinars will be available both on the Parent and Family Program website as well as our YouTube channel. And you can view them at your convenience. And again, once again, feel free to reach out via email, phone call, Facebook, Instagram, whatever works and whatever's convenient for you. Lastly, I hope all of you, students and parents alike, will register for our homecoming activities. Homecoming, including Parent and Family Weekend, will take place October 18th through 24th. More announcement will be forthcoming about family-specific activities and events. We'll have them both virtually and a handful of them perhaps in person. And we hope many of you can join us at that time. With that, on behalf of Jody and Dan and Marilyn, Dr. Galland, the three professors, and other colleagues from around UC San Diego, I wish you a very good evening from La Jolla, from UC San Diego, and look forward to seeing you at another webinar, or better yet, in person. Goodbye now. 再见.